Hello class, we're going to continue with our second lecture video on the endocrine system. So this will be an introduction to the endocrine system, how it works, what are involved, what are the glands. As we build this understanding, we're going to go into individual pathways. So let's first just focus on learning what is the endocrine system. Don't get too bogged down in all the little details at this point. Just really get a good picture of what the endocrine system is. So the endocrine system has a number of gland cells, tissues that will make hormones. So endo means within. So any cells, glands, or tissue that will make and secrete hormone into the blood is considered an endocrine cell. But there are major endocrine glands, which are listed here, and you need to learn about, and you will need to identify these in the anatomy portion of the Unit 1 exam. You also want to make sure you start collecting what each gland does and do as we lecture and get into more of the details of each gland. Some of the glands we will not go into detail at all, but a lot of these we will spend a lot of time learning. There are also, as we move on to each system, there are also endocrine glands and cells that will regulate that system. So there will be more as we go on. You'll also see in this lecture notes, sometimes you'll see this teal color. Those are clickable links if you're using PowerPoint to allow you to watch the video for overviews. These same videos are also attached to the weekly pages, the learning activities, so you can also access those videos that way. Okay, so again, take some time to learn the endocrine gland, practice. I have them in the practice quiz, so you should quiz yourself. Try not to look at notes and see if you can identify them. Okay, let's look now at what is the general mechanism of endocrine signaling. So I'll explain this picture, but I also am a big proponent about drawing things out and using color coding. So you'll see me using color coding to match explanation of each activity. So here's your blood. So if your blood is in merry, happy homeostasis state, that endocrine pathway may not be activated. But if there's a change in that pathway, okay, that might now alter the homeostasis, then the body needs to respond to bring it back to homeostasis. Stimulus, anything that kind of changes, will send a signal, usually through the blood, but it could be other things like neuronal signal, into the endocrine gland. The endocrine gland is made of secreting cells that will make and release hormone into the blood. So you have step 2 is the endocrine gland in black, releasing that purple little dot, the hormone, into the blood. Okay, the hormone will travel all over the blood. So if you take a blood sample from a patient on the left arm, the right arm, and the leg, that hormone is present in that blood sample. The hormone will travel, and it's gonna kind of look, right, for a binding site. If this does not have the correct receptor, this cell is not a target cell. However, if you move into another cell that has the correct binding site, then the hormone can bind to this target specific receptor. Step 4, the receptor will bind, and that will send signal to the target cell here in blue, creating a various amount of response. This response could be a wide range of activities, and we will learn them as we go through each pathway. So the response then will do whatever it does and restore homeostasis or create the action needed that was caused by step 1. When all that is done and everything's back to normal, then the endocrine gland is shut off and the hormone is no longer there. Okay, so let's take a look at how I draw it all here. I gave an example of looking at food. So you see all these are color coded, so you can go back and forth if you don't know what each one looks like. So like, for example, here, red hormone, you can immediately pick that up that the step 3 here, insulin, is actually a hormone. So I will encourage you to use color. I use that a lot through the notes and through lecture. And when you journal this, make sure you are using a color system that right away when you look at the pathway, you can see hormone, gland, stimulus, response, target tissue, target response. And when you draw things in pathways, don't forget that the drawing is good, but you want to have the words to go with that drawing. So color coded words to go with that drawing. You also want to practice this. Some students will say, well, I'm not a visual learner. Well, how about your patient? Well, if they're a visual learner, can you draw to allow them to see what it means? So really practice on that kind of idea. Okay, so make sure you practice drawing. Okay, and it could be boxes and circles and stars, whatever you need. Okay, so you want to follow this color scheme. Make sure you have that supply. Okay, so let's take a look at how we can put this into action, looking at the endocrine system. So this next slide is really just looking at, well, what is step 1, the stimulus? What can it be? How do you turn on the endocrine gland? Okay, so you want to then look at here. Basically, I'm saying, what is step 1? How are the endocrine glands stimulated? And they fall into 3 categories. And these 3 categories are humoral, neuronal, and hormonal. Okay, so they differ a little bit, and you can look at how they differ. So I draw here, they're drawn side by side, but you want to focus on, because we're looking at stimulus, the stimulation, you're actually focusing on the green. So here, here, and here. You're comparing and contrasting the 3 green spots. So let's take a look at first at the humoral. Humors of the blood is the fluid portion of your blood. Okay, so that would be the blood fluid. So here, something changes in the blood. Here we have example, high blood glucose. It could be high blood oxygen. It could be low blood oxygen. It could be calcium, sodium. So the list goes on. Your blood is a concoction of things, and there should be a homeostasis. Just for simplicity's sake, let's look at blood glucose. So the high blood glucose now will send a stimulus. In this case, the stimulus is positive, meaning it's going to turn it on the endocrine gland to make a hormone. Don't worry about the details now. We will learn this in great detail in the next unit. So if you look at the definition of a humoral blood level, you want to look at some of the keywords. Glands response to changes in blood levels of something. So, for example, if I said low blood oxygen stimulate the kidney to release erythropoietin. The stimulus here is the low blood levels of oxygen. So that would be an example of humoral. Neuronal is going to have something with neuron in it. Okay, so in this case, the brain sends a signal through a neuron to turn on the endocrine gland to release a hormone. So this will be an example of, upon seeing the fire, the brain stimulates the sympathetic ganglion to turn on the adrenal gland to release adrenaline. So that would be neural, because I said sympathetic ganglion. Okay? The last one is the most confusing. I'm going to be spending the most time on. A hormone itself can be a stimulus. So in this case, the hormone is the stimulus, and that stimulus is hormonal. So let's example of this. Remember, I color coded this black box as a gland. So a gland releases a hormone we're going to call hormone 1. Well, hormone 1 is a hormone, but hormone 1 comes to the anterior pituitary here and turns that on. So hormone 1 is actually functioning as a stimulus of the pituitary gland, of this gland. Okay? So that in that definition, the gland releases a hormone downstream when stimulated by another hormone upstream. Okay, so the stimulus stimulated by an upstream hormone. Let's take a look at another example here. This can go on and on, right? So when the pituitary gland here releases hormone 2, hormone 2's job is to turn on the next endocrine gland. So in this case, hormone 2 is a hormonal stimulus of the endocrine gland. Okay, let me give you an example. Thyroid stimulating hormone released by the anterior pituitary stimulates the thyroid gland to release thyroid hormone. What kind of stimulus is this? So TSH is a hormone, but it's stimulating the thyroid gland. So it's a hormonal stimulus. Okay, so here you can see the power of color coding and looking at examples and examples. I have a number of examples on the practice quiz to allow you to practice these 3 types of stimulus. So I encourage you to take good notes, draw, and then practice on the practice quiz. And then take more notes and come back and review. And I also have some practice questions here for you to think about it and apply. Some more practice. So the key to really understanding a concept and understanding some of this complicated thing is I've built in a lot of practice. You want to practice deliberately. So don't just look at a question like here and say, oh, I know the answer. But to ask yourself, why? Can I draw it all? Can I take these and draw all an example and explain why is one answer correct or one answer wrong, okay? To truly and deeply understand that, okay? So, and here again, I also encourage you to draw something so that you can really test your knowledge of the mechanisms of the endocrine system. A lot of times there's little details in the question, but you don't want to focus on the little detail. You want to see what is concept is she testing me on? How do I use the slides I just learned to answer these questions and the practice questions? Well, good luck. If you have any questions, post in the discussion board or send me an email or meet me in my office hour, in the virtual office hour.